Thanks for everybody coming today. I want to tell you, I tried to pack the audience with my wife Maggie, my daughter Annie, and my granddaughter Zoe. So anyway, I just a little bit about Mom. This is a picture of her in front here as a young woman, as at her typewriter, where I can remember her like countless mornings typing away on that typewriter while we were waiting for breakfast that we had to get for ourselves because she was busy on the typewriter. But anyway, so Mom got here. She is from Central Valley's Modesto, Exeter area, and she did some college, and then she wound up on the Nevada, or rather the Napa paper, the old Napa Daily Journal in 1938 as a reporter, and she later, during the World War II years, was at the Naval Register as a writer and an editor. So Dad gets out of St. Mary's, gets a summer job at the Napa Register, and that's where they meet, on rival newspapers, and so they could go out. He'd actually go over to her newspaper and help her get the edition out so they could go out to dinner somewhere. And we're surprised by the publisher one time who demanded to know what the rival newspaper guy was doing in his office. So anyway, and so Dad gets an offer of a job in Vallejo in 1940 when, as many of you know, the town was just booming like crazy and they needed help. And so that's what got him to Vallejo, and then he was driving an old Plymouth coupe of some kind back and forth every day. He goes into the Navy in World War II. Senator Gibson, who owned the Times-Herald, said, when you get out, you got your job back. So at the end of the war, he's hired back into the Times-Herald, and at that point is managing editor, a job that he held, for decades after that. And they moved to Vallejo, a little house on Fresno Street. Mom saw the ad for the old huge house at 720 Georgia Street, which we still have, and that's where they moved in 1946, and that's where all of us grew up, 7 kids, 3 boys, 4 girls. Wow. And so in that time frame of those growing up years, Mom was writing for a lot of different publications. She was a stringer for the Sacramento Bee. That's what got her on the typewriter every morning, copying stories out of the Times-Herald to be put in an envelope to be taken by a Greyhound bus or the Postal Service to Sacramento. She did the same thing for the San Francisco Examiner, for the Oakland Tribune. She wrote for Ladies' Home Journal, McCall's, Family Weekly. She did PR work for several years for Kristian Brothers Winery, and wrote also for a lot of wine publications. So basically the whole time we were growing up, she was writing something. It was just an experience that we thought was absolutely normal. That's how all families live, and then in 1981 to 1984, she was a reporter and columnist for the Vallejo Independent Press. Vallejo Independent Press was a strike paper formed in 1978 after the owner of the paper, Senator Luther Gibson, sold to Don Ray Media Group. It was Don Ray, stands for Don Reynolds. We knew him in the journalism trade as Uncle Piggy because of the way he treated his employees and the salary scale. Which, and there's Bob Lawson is here in the room. Bob worked both for the Times-Herald and then for the Vallejo Independent. Raise your hand, Bob. And so he knows a lot of this firsthand. And so, on a very interesting journalism note, the strike paper, which lasted until, what?
84.
84. So 6 years. It's still to this day is the longest strike paper in American journalism history. And it was because of the local community support. All the local merchants kept running ads in the independent press. The Times Herald was getting by on all the big commercial accounts, you know, they were making money that way. But the VIP did a really great job of reporting on Vallejo for several years at peanut level salaries for those who went through that whole phase and dedicated. And then that staff, by the way, was almost the entire staff of the old Times Herald, who were ushered out the door because Don Ray did not want a unionized paper, and the Times Herald had been heavily unionized by Senator Gibson. So anyway, the books came out in 1988 and 1990, and I'm just going to read one of the reviews. This was right on spot, I think. Bill Glacken, he was an art critic for the Sacramento Bee, Pulitzer Prize winner as well. And the books are The Wife of Riley, and The Wife of Riley is a play on The Life of Riley, which was a popular TV show starring William Bendix. And so Glacken writes, as for the pun in the title, it's shameless, but perfect. And he said that Mom writes, quote, with a clear eye as well as a warm heart, a sense of the ridiculous that includes herself, the wit to see where the wry is, and a style that's artful and yet as natural as friend-to-friend talk. She's a wonder, not least because she's the mother of 7 children and has survived with strength to tell these tales. So in her book dedications, there's a lot of familiar names here for folks from Vallejo. She thanked Dad, Dorothy Watson, Jan Stockstill, Mimi Ferrone, Isabel Chrisman, Vivian Hopkins, Sue Lemon, Kathy Rosengren, Tom Crawford, and my brother Mike, who pushed her to do Volume 2 after Dad died in 1988. And the books include columns as well as poems, and I was going to give you a few samples of the poems, funny ones. Most of them in a real simple rhyming scheme. This is in one of the books. It's called Regret. She says, oh, I've written a jumble of stories in verse that I meant to live down the ages, and I well have done so clever it was, if I had only numbered the pages. Then this one on creativity. They know that creativity, impossible to store, tends to return with added drive in menial task and chore. They find a relaxation as they rake and paint and fix. Even Winston Churchill was fond of laying bricks. Don't tell me where there are dishes awaiting in the sink. I do intend to do them, but I need some time to think. Here's one on and then Dad always had a boat, and he always wanted Mom to go out on the boat, and she never really wanted to go out, but she did on occasion. But here's a couple from that. When we go sailing, just we two, out upon the ocean blue, one is captain, one is crew, guess who? Here's another one. Dear, this one's entitled, Dear, I'm sorry I dropped the compass overboard. If you ever find me floating in the channel and it's clear that I am gone beyond recall, no matter what is said as to why I am so dead, oh, I didn't, no, I truly didn't fall. I got another one. This one is, this way, please. I am very fond of airways and of green and rolling fairways, also little winding stairways, fascinating to me tideways. Straight and narrow ways, not wide ways, although I may look at them sideways. And I dearly love the seaways, swift as an arrow freeways, also lovely lined with treeways, much I cherish little byways, and I even dear love thy ways when they coincide with my ways. do the painting, a job I adore, if you will clean up what I spill on the floor. And for the Catholics here, a Saturday night confession time. Confession is a dreary chore. It could be quite sublime if I could itemize your sins instead of telling mine. And then I got just one more. This one's called Temperature Winter-like. The gentle words, "I'm sorry, dear," fall very softly on the ear. Melting ice and cold resentment, reinstating sweet contentment. I said them to my love last night, although of course I had been right. I said my line, he had his cue to say, "Dear, I am sorry too." He spoke the words, but not in quite, and I am sure I heard them right, the way I longed so much to hear. He said, "I'm glad you're sorry, dear." The snow drifts high outside the door, the ice is very thin. Although the calendar says June, the Cold War's on again.
Amen.
A lot of the writing that she did, a lot of the columns were the sort of rivalry that she had with Dad. They're both writers, they're both editors. They had these monumental, epic-length Scrabble games where they would try to, beat one another at word games. And so they had this competition that existed in their professional life that, of course, we were all exposed to it as kids. And it could get pretty noisy around the house. But again, I've told this to Maggie, who grew up in a sort of a softer, easier going Midwest environment. I thought this noisy kind of a lot of calamity around the house thing was normal behavior. And I don't know that it really was now. Other people have said, no, not everybody has that much noise going on. Well, I'm going to go through a handful of the columns here. These are all in the books, either the first or second volume. This one is called The Prospective Suitor. That would be Dad. It would be Napa, 1938, where they met. They'd gone out for a couple of times, and Mom decided to invite Dad and his editor and his editor's wife over to her apartment for dinner. So in the apartment, a neighboring apartment was the home of Esther Parker, who was the high school cooking teacher. So she told Esther that Dad was coming over, and Esther said, well, you should impress him. And she proposes this dinner of hors d'oeuvres and rare roast beef and potatoes and green beans and rolls and salad and apple pie and coffee and brandy. And Mom says, there's no way I can do this. I was thinking of cartons of Chinese food. But Esther says that she would do everything and sneak it in the kitchen door, which was a separate door into the apartment. And Mom could pretend that she had cooked the whole meal. So the dinner was a huge success. Here's the quote from Mom. We were married soon after. I would not go so far as to say that dinner was the deciding factor. I refuse to believe that a Wado man's heart is through his stomach. As Miss Parker staunchly maintained and is telling the story for several successful decades to her cooking students at Napa. This is one of my favorites. This is Ann Landers came to Vallejo, the famed columnist. She was very striking, beautiful, poised, and she spoke to this overflow crowd at Hogan School, and was a guest of honor at a reception that followed. And Dad had been delegated to escort her from point to point, and on an impulse brought her by the house where Mom was sick in bed. And Mom described herself as, quote, propped up in bed, smeared with mentholatum, wearing a flannel nightgown and unable to walk. I felt like an illustration for a book entitled, Why Attractive Husbands Leave Home. The rest of the quote was, I was at that point really when a lot of women women pick up a pen and paper and write to Ann Landers a letter beginning, "Dear Ann, my husband is out with another woman." I was the only woman in the world that night who couldn't even do that. My husband was out with Miss Landers. That's a typical columnist kind of. She would find stuff. This one actually happened. You know, Ann Landers was actually here, and Dad did take her around town. I don't know if any of the rest of it was made up, but it's a good story. One of my favorites. This is another one. Mom had to give a speech to the Chamber of Commerce. And she wrote it about that in a column. It was the first time she had made any kind of public speech in 25 years, and here's why. Her speech all the years earlier was a disaster, and she vowed never to try public speaking again. The story is how she had been asked to participate in a panel discussion on juvenile delinquency as a mother of 7 children, who for the most part weren't in that category. But a week before the discussion, she answers the door to a young man who introduced himself as a juvenile officer. She thought at first that he had heard something about her upcoming talk and was going to ask for some pointers. No, he said, a band of small boys had broken some windows in a neighborhood greenhouse, and he had reason to believe that the Riley boys were among the culprits. We were 5, 7, and 9 years old. Confronted, we confessed before he even asked us, and we were deprived of all but a dime a week of our 35-cent a week allowance until our share of the damage was paid for. So Mom wrote that she was depressed about being on the panel but couldn't get out of it. And when she took a seat among the other panelists, she realized that one was the juvenile officer who had come to the house a few days earlier. She writes, quote, my whole being slipped out of sync. Every time I got ready to deliver one of my comments, the word stuck in my throat. Every time I tried to talk, I would look over at the young juvenile officer who just sat there staring straight ahead with a mean little smile on his face. Oh, I know what he was thinking. Take a good look at her, folks, sitting there trying to pass herself off as an expert on children. And she's got the meanest bunch of undisciplined brats in town. I don't remember this incident, but it's a good story. And I do remember some broken windows, but I'm not going to admit to having any role in doing it. This is one of my favorites too. This is called Uncle Jake's False Teeth. And Mom's good friend was Gene Rahaga, Gene and Vic Rahaga, just wonderful people in town. The Rahagas and the Rileys were great pals. So Gene wanted Mom to go with her down to the Cavern, which was a basement level dive bar on Lower Georgia Street. Gene's 80-year-old Uncle Jake had returned from a night of drinking on the town, minus his false teeth. And a couple weeks later, Gene spots an ad in from the Cavern stating that some false teeth had been found there. You get the picture of what kind of bar this was. So Jake refuses to go to the bar, and Jane won't go alone, so she talks Mom into going with her. They tried to retrieve the teeth quietly, but everyone in the bar was listening in, and the bartender recognized Jane as the sister of our chief of police, Jack Stills. So finally they flee from the bar with the teeth. They drive over to Jake's apartment. He puts the teeth in his mouth, and they don't fit. Jake couldn't believe it, and Jean couldn't believe it, and she tried to help by pushing the teeth back in his mouth. So Mom writes, quote, Uncle Jake began to gag. The teeth protruded rather like a beaver's teeth. We tried not to laugh, but it was too much. Those quotes. Uncle Jake wasn't amused. He said the teeth should go back to the bar. So they go back to the car. Jean says she cannot go back to the Cavern. Instead, she goes here to the police department, which was in the basement of this building, and asks her brother, Jack Stills, the police chief, to return the teeth. So Mom, quote, the chief did it, but reluctantly. he looked like he might have preferred chasing a bank robber down Georgia Street. I think that's a true story. There's one more here. This one, the column is called "What's So Funny," where she raises the question of whether something is wrong with her sense of humor, that it might get a little mean-spirited. So she describes this one thing that made her laugh. It was the only accident at the annual big sailboat race, which at that point was bringing hundreds of boats to Vallejo, and thousands of people were around. And a woman leaving the yacht club lost her footing on the dock and fell into the river. Her husband jumps in to save her, and they both need to be saved. And Mom said they both had to be saved by security guards who were hired for just this eventuality. And concluded, don't ask me why I find this so amusing, but I do. And then she tells a story about her fellow VIP reporter, Barbara Hunter, who mentioned an article about a veteran organization that refused to continue giving members of TOPS, which was a weight loss group for overnight women, a rent-free meeting space. She writes, quote, "They said they were tired of having to sweep up all the cookie crumbs after the women's left." In the same column, Mom also wrote about letters that my younger sister Megan wrote during a month-long stay with our sister Ellen's home in Oregon. Ellen at that point had the first 3 of her 5 sons. And so the first letter, Megan says, Mom quotes Megan as saying, "I know I wanted to stay here a month, but a week is enough. Please come and get me." That's followed shortly after by a second letter in which Megan says she was bored and, quote, "The little boys are spoiled monsters. Can you come and get me this weekend?" The third letter, quote, "Ellen acts like she's my mother and she gives me a big pain. Please come and get me." The fourth letter refers to the little monsters or cousins, saying, "I hate them. They are true brats, even worse than Mike, her brother. When are you coming to get me?" And Mom concludes by saying that Megan calmed down and eventually had a good time. But I checked with Megan this morning, and she said she never wrote any of those letters. I don't know who's telling the truth here. But it ties in with what Mike said a couple of days ago. I tried to coax him into sharing the podium up here with me, but he said he had a very pressing engagement. He had to wash the dog. But he also said, and I agree, that in much of Mom's column writing, the important thing was the storyline and not necessarily the facts. That said, it's definitely entertaining reading, and I hope you'll get the books and enjoy them. Any questions? Yeah.
Brendan, a family of 7, I mean, she must have had a ton of stories. Are they in there? I mean, just saying.
Yeah, there's lots of.
Like, you guys, 7 children, you must have been a comedy, you know?
It was comical.
And how did she manage 7 children and her whole resume that you told us in the beginning? How did she do all that?
that was some people might call it child neglect. But we lived in Vallejo at a time where you could really be out on the street doing stuff and not really getting in a lot of trouble. You know, it was frankly a better time, and we were out on our own a lot. The boys we all had paper routes. We had our own money. You know, we earned our own money, and Mom would be in there typing, and Dad was editing not only the Morning Times Herald but the Afternoon News Chronicle. He was a slave to the newsroom, and so. But I think it was the time. It was people knew us. We knew all our neighbors. We kind of looked out. Families looked out for one another.
Wow. And you had Mrs. Kelly.
Oh,
yeah, we had Mrs. Kelly. I shouldn't forget her. Mrs. Kelly was hired to cook.
Oh.
Thank God.
That is a true story.
That's a true story, because Mom was a lousy cook.
That is funny.
Yeah, Mrs. Kelly was a savior. Linda.
So it sounds like she had to kind of curtail some of her journalism when she got married and had kids, even though she kept writing. Do you think she resented that, or?
Well, probably.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she let Dad know about it. But she did all this work in the study, and you guys have been in our house. She sat in there with that typewriter and just banging away on it, and for all hours.
Yeah.
And so she continued writing all the time.
I really enjoyed the stories about the house too in the book.
Yeah.
So since you said some of the stories are not necessarily all true, the truth about how you got your name, how accurate is that story?
You know, that's a true story. I didn't tell that story, but I got my very Irish name thanks to Dad's Jewish commanding officer in the Navy, Ed Wallerstein, who Dad had never heard of St. Brendan, but Ed had for some reason, and kept pushing that name. And as the story goes in the book, Wallerstein had a bet with the other officers that he could get that name on the new coming baby. He was making money on the deal.
Oh, like betting on the Pope.
What?
Like betting on the new Pope.
Yeah.
That's a Catholic thing.
Bob.
Yeah, St. Brendan is, if you're ever on the Ring of Kerry over in Ireland, there's a metal statue of him and 3 other monks in a leather boat. That was he's the one who discovered America. But
Long before Columbus or
oh yeah,
Vikings.
Yeah, 6th century. When was the article in the Saturday Evening Post? That's the first time that I had ever read it. That was a real famous article.
No, the Ladies' Home Journal.
Ladies' Home Journal, yeah.
That was 1957. And she had pitched this story, and they sent someone out to write it, and she insisted on writing at least part of it, and which doesn't surprise me at all that she. But for that, I remember it was a big deal. She was paid $1,500, which in today's dollars would be like getting 20 grand. And you know, it was a big deal for her. And the story is actually at the end of one of these books. It's a pretty cool story about the house being not for sale. You know, and that's the title of the story.
I think she told the story, if I remember right, is that she actually converted to Catholicism when she married her father.
Right.
And which I think she made a big point of that, and she did.
Yeah, she's a real fire breather. We had sore knees from having to say prayers at night. It was tough. It was tough at that point in our life.
This gentleman over there.
Yeah, Tom.
Oh, well, Brendan, it's up to you and your family, of course, but I was thinking when the conversation is over, if they would join you on this stage, I could get a couple of pictures.
Oh, you can do that. Sure. Yeah.
Well, it's up to you, of course.
Yeah. Let's do any more Q&A. Yes.
What was your mother's educational background?
She had taken, and I don't know exactly what college it was, but she did take some journalism classes, and haven't been able to find out exactly where she did that. So she had some experience to get on with the Napa paper. But then after all of us, she'd gotten all of us, and Dad had gotten all of us through college, she goes back to UC Berkeley, gets a degree in English Lit with honors, and even does part of her graduate thesis, which is another story because my sister Megan, the youngest, did not want to go to St. Mary's College. And that's where Mom wanted her to go. Megan wanted to go to Berkeley because that's where all the action was. St. Mary's was kind of quiet and sleepy and so on, you know. So Megan ends up going to St. Mary's, and then Mom, when she gets time to do it, she goes to Berkeley. But anyway, so that's but her talent for writing, you know, her mother encouraged her to read. Her mother was a daughter of Swedish immigrants, And her mother really encouraged her to read and read to her. And that was an early influence with, you know, with the written word that she talks about a little bit.
So, Brendan, I just think it's important to say, like during World War II, she became an editor, but then when the war ended, like so many women, she was no longer able to be the editor. She had to go back.
Well, actually, though, but and you know, Maggie, I know that would have happened if they had stuck around Napa, but they didn't. That's the same time that they moved from Napa to Vallejo.
But your mom felt that that was part of the reason.
Well, that's not why they moved to Vallejo. They got tired of driving this old Plymouth coupe back and forth. You know, but absolutely, that was certainly going on all over the nation. Yes? Annie?
You were born down in San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
So what point in that timeline did they move from? Like, were they already in the Georgia Street house, or were they already down there?
So Dad gets, when he was in the Aleutian campaign, and when he gets back, they sent him down to San Luis Obispo, which had a landing craft training center, and he was a beach master, and he was training these guys for the final assault on Japan in the Pacific South, you know, and so Mom leaves Napa, piles in the old car and drives down to San Luis to join Dad. They rented a little house, and that's where I came along. And then at age 1 or close one, a couple months, one way or the other, we came back to Vallejo, and that's when they got the Vallejo house. Anyone, we run out of questions? Looks like, or Bob?
Well, you know, the whole thing you were talking about, I think really stands out is what our town was like back in those days.
Yeah.
In the journalistic thing, had old line newspaper people doing it the old way. So funny, I remember guys like Milt Dunlap.
Yes.
Okay, he has to write the It's Rich column. He's got no column, so he takes a walk up the street to Green Cigar Store.
Right.
And by the time he's come back, he's been inspired, and he has the It's Rich column for the next day. Or for Carol Cross, who stood up on this stage during city council meetings at 11 o'clock, which meant he could make deadline back then, he didn't, you know.
Right.
And he running behind the councilman and saying, vote, damn it, vote, you know. And then people like, or Francis Flaherty, who after watching a bad play said, this was little theater in its littlest. But you were just, and so many good stories.
Yes.
And even if they got embellished sometimes, they were still great stories.
Well, it's true. And, you know, the names that Bob just mentioned, these reporters, Jack Daly and Red Buer and Marion Devlin. And this is a crew that Mom and Dad hung out with. These are their friends. And the newsroom itself was like a clubhouse of these people who had worked together for decades. And guys like me and Bob were the newcomers, right? But it was, I worked in journalism my whole career. I worked for Associated Press. I was around a lot of different newsrooms. I never saw a newsroom where the people did as much work and had as much fun as the Vallejo Times-Herald. It was a really wonderful group of reporters, journalists, and their contribution to the community. You just have to look at the old archives. These are papers, they covered everything. And one thing, this is true too, if they knew something big was happening, they would stick around late, you know, and not send the paper to print until midnight or even a little later, because they knew the San Francisco Chronicle was going to press, say at 10:30 or 11, and they could have a front page that beat the Chronicle with more current news. I mean, to think, they felt that they were competing against the big dog in the Bay Area, but they did it. They did it on it routinely because that was the way they felt about their work. So, yeah, Tom.
Well, I remember too, at one time there was the evening was the Evening Times-Herald, but I mean, there was two of them, the Evening
News Chronicle.
Yeah, whichever it was, and how did that, could you speak to that just briefly, because that eventually stopped? And
Yeah, well, the News Chronicle was, in both papers, the Times-Herald and the News Chronicle are each a combination of 2 earlier papers, so it's 4 papers, you know, coalescing into 2, and eventually to the 1 that we now have. But the News Chronicle was just sort of had the highlights and some of the previous day's news, but it was, I don't know, about what you call it, like a bulldog edition, you know, to just kind of get something out there that was really current. If something big happened in the morning, it would be in print, you'd be reading it in the evening.
Yeah,
The morning paper.
Jack Daly was the editor, the daily editor of that. That was Jack's baby.
Yeah,
News Chronicle.
yeah. So, yes.
Yeah, Brandon, I have a question about, it's a domestic question at your household. You mentioned having an Irish cook, Mrs. Kelly. So did she cook traditional Irish food for you, for your family, as well as did she incorporate other kinds of food, traditional American?
Yeah. No, it was kind of.
Spaghetti and meatballs and all that?
Yeah, it was
stuff?
kind of standard fare, you
Yeah.
know, it wasn't.
What you could get here in town.
Yeah, the Irish thing wasn't really, we just happened to be a lot of Irish in the family and around us, but it wasn't a big deal. Like Dad didn't know a word of Gaelic, you know, or anything like it. There were people in town who sort of liked that sort of thing, but.
You were assimilated.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah. So, and
One more thing. I just wanted to say too how important Grandma Marge's education was for her granddaughters and her grandkids. So when Zoe was born in '93, she set up an investment account through one of her people here for college when she was just brand new baby. Like once I finally got her social security number, I remember her like trying to get
That's
that
great.
so she could send it out.
yeah, that was really important. The education thing was so important. They really pushed it for all of us. And we're all the better for it.
Who did the drawings?
Oh, you know, it's in the book, and I forget her name. It's in the intro to one of the books. It's a local woman who.
Should the newspaper have a caricaturist person? I don't know what the right title would be.
Cartoonist, Baroni, Dave Baroni, but mostly he did. Mostly he did sport.
How long was he there?
Oh, Dave was there forever.
Yeah.
He was there before Dad got there, and was there when the paper shut down. His dad was a barber in town. Dave had a great affinity. His
Who has
drawings.
his collection? Is it all?
We
there?
have some here. Trevor has a
Yep,
bunch of
yes,
them.
we do.
And others are scattered around. Yeah.
That leads to my question is how can we come back and read those papers and look at them?
Well,
That's Trevor.
yeah, no, Trevor, I know it's online through newspapers.com, which is really worth the money to subscribe to.
Oh.
If you belong already to Ancestry, you can get a cut rate deal for newspapers.com. And I live on newspapers.com. It's got all the Vallejo papers from the 1860s forward. And it's tremendous, it's searchable, Google searchable. If you don't want to subscribe to it, Trevor is setting up an access terminal here, right?
Yep, we have it set up.
It is set up.
Yep, and if you want to go down to the basement, you got to sign the waiver.
If you want to open the pages one at a time, as Tom Snyder and I, we used to sit across the table getting chips of new old crumbly paper all over us. Stand up and have to dust it off and feel guilty because the papers are falling apart as a result of you opening the pages. But the online searching tool was great. It's just like Google. Really good.
I just wanted to thank you, Brendan, for doing this, but one last question, or unless there's any others. So your mother wrote, was that the impulse behind you? I mean, obviously your father, but did she, being a columnist, did that open that possibility up to you? And if so, did she encourage you and did your father encourage you, or did they both?
But you know, it's funny because one of my first, you can barely call it writing, but the stuff she would pull out of the Times Herald to send to the Sacramento Bee even included really mundane stuff like marriage notices and birth announcements. So I got to type up some of those. I'm like 12 years old on this old Underwood typewriter. And so it basically, though, that they, it was all by example. They didn't really encourage it. It's just what we grew up with. Like I said earlier, we thought it was normal behavior to read and write, because that's what Mom and Dad did all the time. So, you grow up in that environment, and, two of my sisters worked as journalists, and my brother is a teacher. One of those two sisters also became a teacher. I was going to, but newspapering seemed like it'd be more fun, and indeed it was. So anyway, so that was the environment we grew up in. Cool. So,
Was AP your first job?
no, my first job was on the Times Herald.
Oh, I see. Can you say something about AP? I mean, I don't know how much we all know about what that really is. Since it's in the news now, they're banned from the White House.
Banned from the White House. They got back in through a court case. But AP is the largest news gathering organization in the world, I think still. And it is fair-minded. Our job was to go down the middle, get arguments on both sides. If you colored your stories one way or the other, hello, is anyone doing that in today's journalism? You'd get fired. Today you would get fired if you did that. They are an honest news outlet. I pitch that all the time because there's so much out there that you don't know whether to believe it or not. And if you see some crazy story that you aren't sure of, put in the same words on Google and put AP or Associated Press and see what AP said about it. And I think that's why you can take it to the bank.
You went to work for the AP from Nevada. You were writing for the Reno paper, weren't you?
No.
No?
I was with AP.
Went direct to them?
Started in San Francisco, went to Sacramento, covered Ronald Reagan, and then from there to Nevada.
Oh, okay.
And I stayed with them until 2009. And then I stayed on as an election consultant in election years until 2022.
And then
So,
how many years total covering elections?
covering what?
Elections.
Well, that makes 50 years. Yeah, 50 years of covering elections.
Wow.
And at least in Nevada, there was never any significant in any way cheating by election people. There may have been lying and cheating candidates, but that's a whole different deal. But the people who volunteer and work in clerks' offices around that state are the straightest bunch of people you ever want to know. So, anyway. Well, thank you. All votes.